I'm Alexandra Hayes, 28, standing in the back corner of the Marriott's Grand Ballroom watching my father Robert Hayes deliver his retirement speech to 300 distinguished guests. My simple black dress from Nordstrom Rack feels like a neon sign, advertising my supposed failure among the sea of designer gowns and tailored suits. As I clutch a carefully wrapped package in my trembling hands, my father's voice booms across the room. I'm most proud of my sons, Michael and David, who've proven they have what it takes to carry on the Hayes legacy. Unlike my daughter who chose to waste her potential on frivolous pursuits, the applause that follows his words feels like a physical blow. Tonight, everything changes. Growing up as the youngest child and only daughter of Robert Hayes meant living in a world where my worth was measured against impossible standards that only applied to me. My father built Hayes Financial Group from a small accounting firm into one of the most respected investment companies on the East Coast. His rags to riches story was legendary in financial circles. A working-class kid from Boston who earned a scholarship to Harvard Business School and transformed a $10,000 loan into a multi-million-dollar empire. My earliest memory of being dismissed was at age 6, when I found my father reviewing investment portfolios in his home office. I had been fascinated by the colorful charts and asked what made some lines go up while others went down. Instead of explaining, he patted my head condescendingly. "That's not something little girls need to worry about, sweetheart. Why don't you go play with your dolls?" Even at 6, I sensed that my brothers Michael and David, just 8 and 10 at the time, would never have received such a dismissive response. My mother Catherine was a former investment banker who had given up her career when Michael was born, a sacrifice my father frequently praised as putting family first. She tried to balance his traditional views with encouragement for my interests, but the underlying message was clear. My role was to be decorative, not decisive. When I excelled in mathematics and economics in high school, she would quietly celebrate my achievements while warning me not to threaten others with my intelligence. The pattern of dismissal established early only intensified as I grew older. When I was named valedictorian of my high school class, my father attended the graduation ceremony but spent most of it on his phone handling a crisis at work. Meanwhile, he had taken time off to attend every single one of Michael's baseball games, even though Michael rarely left the bench. When I received a full scholarship to study finance at Wharton, his response was lukewarm. "Nice hobby degree. At least you won't cost me tuition money." My brothers weren't malicious, just comfortable in a system that favored them. Michael and David had been groomed from childhood to eventually join Hayes Financial Group. They spent summers interning at the company, attended industry conferences as my father's guests, and were included in business discussions from which I was systematically excluded. When I expressed interest in finance during family dinners, the conversation would invariably shift to topics deemed more appropriate for me: wedding planning, homemaking, or charitable work. The 3 defining moments of our relationship stand out like landmarks on a painful journey. The first occurred when I was 14 and had developed a sophisticated understanding of portfolio theory by secretly reading my father's professional journals. During a family dinner where Michael and David were discussing their summer internship plans, I suggested a specific investment strategy I'd researched. My father's response was swift and humiliating. "Alexandra, investing is serious business that requires experience and judgment. Perhaps you should focus on subjects more suited to your abilities." The second moment came during my sophomore year at Wharton, when I earned the highest grades in my investment analysis class and was selected for the prestigious summer program at Goldman Sachs. Instead of congratulation, my father expressed concern that I was becoming too aggressive and might have trouble finding a husband if I continued down this path. "Men don't like women who are too competitive," he warned, as if my professional aspirations were a character flaw to be corrected. The third and most painful moment occurred after my mother's sudden death from a heart attack during my senior year of college. At the funeral reception, I overheard my father talking to his brother about the future of the company. "At least the boys understand the business," he said, his voice carrying across the room. "Alexandra's smart enough, but she doesn't have the killer instinct you need in this industry. She's too soft, too emotional." Standing there in my black funeral dress, I realized that in his mind, I would always be inadequate simply because I was his daughter rather than another son. After graduating summa cum laude from Wharton, I surprised everyone by declining the obligatory job offer at Hayes Financial Group. Instead, I accepted a position at Morgan Stanley, one of the most competitive investment banks on Wall Street. My father's reaction was predictable. "You'll be back within 6 months when you realize what real pressure feels like. This isn't college anymore, Alexandra." 6 years later, I had not only survived but thrived on Wall Street. I had been promoted 3 times, managed portfolios worth over $500 million, and had earned a reputation as one of the most promising young analysts in the industry. My salary now exceeded both my brother's incomes, though I had never mentioned this fact to my family. Every achievement was met with faint praise disguised as concern. When I was featured in Forbes' 30 Under 30 list, his comment was, "Don't let it go to your head. One article doesn't make a career." Our relationship had settled into a pattern of polite distance punctuated by obligatory family gatherings where I played the role of dutiful daughter while he played the indulgent father. Tolerating my phase, he would ask superficial questions about my little job while spending hours discussing business strategy with Michael and David, who had both joined Hayes Financial Group straight out of college and were being groomed for leadership positions they hadn't earned. The retirement announcement came via an elegant invitation that arrived at my Manhattan apartment on expensive cardstock. "Robert Hayes requests your presence at a celebration of 40 years of excellence in financial services. The event will be held at the Marriott's Grand Ballroom with cocktails, dinner, and what the invitation described as special recognition of those who helped build the Hayes legacy. Marcus, my boyfriend of 3 years and a fellow investment banker, noticed my expression as I read the invitation. "Let me guess," he said, looking up from his laptop. "Your father found a way to make his retirement party about your brothers?" The invitation mentions special recognition for people who helped build the Hayes legacy, I replied, setting the card on our coffee table. "Want to bet I'm not included in that category?" Marcus had witnessed enough Hayes family dynamics during our relationship to understand the subtle cruelties that masqueraded as family tradition. As someone who had also navigated competitive financial environments, he recognized the specific ways my father undermined my confidence while maintaining plausible deniability. 2 weeks before the retirement party, Michael called with an unusual request. "We're putting together a tribute video for Dad," he explained. "Could you write something about what he means to you? Nothing too long, just a paragraph or 2 about his influence on your life." Despite my complicated feelings, I spent hours crafting a tribute that focused on his genuine accomplishments, his business acumen, his philanthropic work, his ability to identify promising investments. I wrote about the work ethic he had modeled and the importance of excellence he had instilled in all his children. I didn't mention that this excellence had never been acknowledged when it came from me. Choosing what to wear required careful consideration. I finally selected a tailored navy dress with subtle designer details, professional enough to command respect, but not so flashy as to upstage the guest of honor. I added my mother's pearl necklace, the one piece of her jewelry that my father had allowed me to keep, and modest heels that wouldn't make me taller than my brothers in photographs. The question of a gift consumed me for days. What do you give a man who has everything he wants materially but has given you so little emotionally? Traditional retirement gifts felt hollow. Golf accessories, luxury watches, travel vouchers. None captured what I wanted to express. A final attempt to make him see me as I truly was, not as he had decided I should be. The answer came during a sleepless night when I was reviewing my professional portfolio. I would give him a comprehensive documentation of my career, not to boast, but to finally show him what his failure had accomplished despite his lack of support. I gathered financial statements showing my income and investment returns, award certificates, press clippings, client testimonials, and performance reviews. I created a professional presentation documenting 6 years of achievements in one of the world's most competitive industries. The centerpiece would be a letter I had written but never sent after being featured in the Wall Street Journal's Rising Stars profile. In it, I had expressed my frustration with his inability to see my success and my sadness that my mother hadn't lived to see me prove myself in the financial world she had once loved. I sealed everything in an elegant portfolio case with a card that read, "For Dad, from your biggest disappointment." I hope this helps you understand what I've been building while you were looking the other way the night before the retirement party. I sat in my apartment overlooking Central Park, second-guessing my decision to attend. Marcus found me staring out at the city lights, the portfolio case on the table beside me. "You don't have to go," he said gently, settling beside me on the couch. "You don't owe him your presence at his celebration." "I know," I replied, "but I need to do this. Not for him, but for me. I need to finally stop hoping for something that's never going to happen naturally." "And you think giving him that portfolio will change anything?" I considered his question carefully. "Maybe not, but at least I'll know I tried one last time to show him who I really am. After that, I can move forward without wondering what if." The Marriott's Grand Ballroom was everything I had expected: crystal chandeliers, white linens, and elaborate floral arrangements that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Hayes Financial Group banners hung strategically around the room, displaying the company logo alongside slogans like 4 decades of excellence and building wealth, building futures. I arrived precisely on time, noting the photographer capturing arrivals against a branded backdrop. The cocktail hour was already underway, with financial industry luminaries mingling over champagne and strategically networked conversations. I recognized faces from business magazines and conference panels, the kind of influential people my father had cultivated relationships with over 4 decades. "Alexandra, how wonderful to see you," gushed Patricia Wellington, wife of one of my father's longtime clients. "You look lovely. Still working at that investment bank?" "Yes, I'm still at Morgan Stanley," I replied, noting how she framed my career as a temporary diversion rather than a serious profession. "How exciting for you," she responded with the kind of enthusiasm typically reserved for children's hobbies. "Your father must be so proud." Similar interactions followed throughout the cocktail hour, business associates expressing mild surprise that I was still playing at being an investment banker, subtle suggestions that I must be looking forward to settling down and starting a family, questions about when I might join the real family business. No one asked about my actual work, my clients, or my professional achievements. I was still seen as Robert Hayes' daughter first and foremost, rather than as Alexandra Hayes, successful investment banker. Michael spotted me near the bar and approached, with his wife Jennifer, both looking polished and comfortable in this environment where they had always belonged. "Dad's been looking forward to seeing you," Michael said, though his tone suggested obligation rather than enthusiasm. "He's talking to the mayor right now, but he'll want to say hello before dinner. Where should I put this?" I asked, indicating the portfolio case I carried. "What is it?" Jennifer asked, her curiosity piqued. "Just a retirement gift," I replied vaguely. "Something personal." David joined our small group, completing the Hayes sibling trinity that had defined my childhood. "Mom would have loved this," he said, surveying the elegant ballroom. "Remember how she always said Dad deserved recognition for what he built?" The mention of our mother created a moment of shared melancholy. Despite our different relationships with our father, we all missed her steadying presence and diplomatic skills. She had been the buffer between his rigid expectations and our individual personalities, the translator who helped us understand each other's perspectives. She would have been proud of all of us, I said carefully, not wanting to create tension. Before the formal program began, absolutely, Michael agreed. Dad always says the company's success is built on family values. The irony of his statement wasn't lost on me, given that those family values had never extended to recognizing my professional achievements. But I smiled and nodded, maintaining the harmony that family gatherings required. Dinner was announced at 7 o'clock, and I found my assigned seat at table 12, positioned in what I recognized as the family, friends, and distant relatives section rather than at the head table where my brothers sat with their wives flanking our father. The portfolio case rested against my chair as servers delivered the first course, a lobster bisque that I couldn't taste past the tightness in my throat. The formal program began after the main course, which I had barely touched. A large screen descended from the ceiling as the lights dimmed for the tribute video. Soft music accompanied a montage of images. My father as a young entrepreneur breaking ground on his first office building, shaking hands with governors and senators, receiving various industry awards and recognition. The family section of the video featured extensive footage of him mentoring Michael and David, teaching them to read financial statements, bringing them to client meetings, proudly introducing them at industry conferences. I appeared in exactly 3 photographs: a family portrait from when I was about 12, my high school graduation where he had been on his phone, and my college graduation where he had arrived late. There was no mention of my academic achievements, my Wall Street career, or my professional recognition. It was as if I had stopped existing once I chose a path outside his direct influence. Following the video, various colleagues and industry leaders took the podium to praise my father's business acumen, ethical standards, and mentorship abilities. The mayor spoke about his contributions to local economic development. The president of the Financial Planning Association highlighted his innovations in portfolio management. A longtime client shared stories about his integrity and wisdom during market volatility. Michael and David delivered a joint speech about growing up in the Hayes family and learning business principles at their father's knee. Everything we know about finance and leadership comes from watching Dad, Michael declared to enthusiastic applause. His legacy lives on through the values he instilled in us, and the company we'll continue to build in his honor. Finally, Robert Hayes himself took the podium to thunderous applause. At 65, he remained an imposing figure, 6 feet tall, with distinguished silver hair and the confident bearing of someone accustomed to commanding attention. He adjusted his tie, a gesture I recognized from countless family dinners and business presentations, signaling that he was about to say something he considered particularly important. 40 years, he began, his voice carrying easily across the ballroom. 40 years of building something meaningful from nothing more than ambition and determination. When I started Hayes Financial Group with a $10,000 loan and a rented office above a delicatessen, people thought I was crazy. Today, we manage over $2 billion in assets and employ more than 300 people. He proceeded through the expected reflections, challenges overcome, risks that paid off, loyal employees who had contributed to the company's success. He spoke about the importance of mentorship, ethical leadership, and building for the future rather than just the present quarter's profits. But if you asked me what I'm most proud of after 4 decades in this business, he continued, his tone becoming more personal, the answer would be simple. I'm proud of the legacy I'm leaving in my sons, Michael and David. He gestured toward the head table where my brothers sat, both beaming with pride. They've proven they have what it takes to carry Hayes Financial Group into the future. They understand sacrifice, strategy, and the responsibility that comes with stewardship of other people's wealth. A pause during which his gaze seemed to scan the room before settling briefly in my direction. Unlike some people who had every advantage but chose to waste their potential on other pursuits, my sons understand what real success requires. The words hit like a physical blow. He hadn't mentioned my name, but in a room full of people who knew the Hayes family, the reference was unmistakable. Several guests glanced in my direction with expressions ranging from pity to embarrassment. At the head table, Michael studied his dessert plate intensely while David shifted uncomfortably in his seat. My father continued his speech, detailing specific accomplishments of each son with obvious pride. Michael's successful management of the European expansion, David's innovative approach to sustainable investing that had attracted environmentally conscious clients, their joint leadership during the 2008 financial crisis that had kept Hayes Financial Group profitable while competitors struggled. These young men represent the future of ethical finance, he concluded. They've earned their positions through merit, dedication, and an understanding of what it truly means to build something lasting. The standing ovation that followed seemed to last forever. Business leaders and family friends rose to their feet, applauding not just my father's career but the sons who would continue his work. I remained seated, one hand gripping the portfolio case, the other clenched so tightly my nails left marks in my palm. In that moment, I made a decision that would change our relationship forever. I stood, smoothed my dress, picked up the portfolio case, and began walking toward the stage. The click of my heels against the polished floor seemed unnaturally loud as conversation gradually quieted around me. I moved with the same purposeful confidence I used when presenting investment strategies to skeptical clients, maintaining eye contact with my father who still stood at the podium accepting congratulations from those nearest the stage. His expression shifted from triumph to confusion as he registered my approach. Behind him, Michael half rose from his seat, uncertain whether to intercept me. David placed a restraining hand on his brother's arm, perhaps sensing that this moment had been building for years and needed to play out. I ascended the 3 steps to the stage, fully aware that 300 pairs of eyes were following my every movement. Years of presenting complex financial analyses to critical audiences had taught me to project calm authority regardless of my internal state, and I drew on that training now as my heart hammered against my ribs. Congratulations on your retirement, Dad, I said when I reached the podium, my voice steady despite the emotional earthquake occurring inside me. I brought you something. I extended the portfolio case toward him. He didn't immediately take it, his expression somewhere between annoyance and alarm at this unexpected disruption of his carefully orchestrated evening. This isn't the time, Alexandra, he said quietly, still holding the microphone. I think it's exactly the right time, I replied, my voice carrying across the silent ballroom. It's from your biggest disappointment. Open it when you're ready to see what wasted potential actually accomplished. I placed the case in his hands, turned away from the microphone, and walked off the stage with the same measured pace I had used to approach it. The silence in the ballroom was absolute as I descended the steps and continued past the head table where my brothers sat frozen in shock. I walked past the tables of business associates with their stunned expressions, past the family friends who suddenly found their dessert plates fascinating, through the grand double doors and into the hotel lobby where the subdued lighting and sparse occupancy provided blessed relief from the scrutiny I had just endured. Only when I reached my car in the parking garage did my composure finally crack. Tears blurred my vision as I fumbled with the keys, the reality of what I had just done hitting me like a delayed shock wave. I had publicly challenged Robert Hayes, the untouchable patriarch, in front of the most important people in his professional world. I managed to drive 3 blocks before I had to pull over, overcome by the magnitude of what had just occurred. There would be no going back from this moment. I had burned the bridge of polite family dysfunction and entered uncharted territory where our relationship would either transform completely or end entirely. My phone began buzzing almost immediately. Text messages from Michael. What was in the case? Followed by, are you okay? From David. Dad looks like he's seen a ghost, and then, call me. I silenced the phone and drove home through the city streets, feeling simultaneously liberated and terrified by my own actions. Marcus was waiting in our apartment, having returned early from a client dinner. One look at my face told him everything he needed to know about how the evening had gone. "That bad?" he asked, opening his arms. I collapsed into his embrace, finally allowing myself the comfort of being held while I recounted the evening, my father's public dismissal, my impulsive response, the portfolio case I had left behind containing 6 years of professional achievements he had never acknowledged. "What do you think he'll do?" Marcus asked after I finished the story. "I don't know," I admitted. "Maybe nothing. Maybe he'll finally see that his disappointment has been more successful than the sons he's so proud of. Maybe it won't matter anymore." But even as I spoke those words, I knew they weren't entirely true. It did matter, or I wouldn't have spent weeks preparing that portfolio. Despite everything, part of me still hoped that Robert Hayes might finally see me for who I actually was rather than who he had decided I should be. Meanwhile, back at the Marriott, my father stood motionless at the podium, holding the portfolio case as the ballroom doors closed behind me. The microphone amplified his uneven breathing throughout the silent room where 300 guests remained frozen in collective discomfort at having witnessed a family drama none had expected to be part of. Michael approached the stage, his diplomatic instincts kicking in. "Dad, we should probably continue with the program," he suggested quietly. "We can deal with this later," but Robert Hayes shook his head, his fingers gripping the portfolio case with surprising intensity. Without a word to his son or any explanation to the bewildered guests, he began methodically opening the case right there at the podium. The microphone picked up each sound: the click of the latches, the whisper of papers being shuffled, his sharp intake of breath as he began to understand what he was looking at. One by one, he removed the contents and placed them on the podium surface where the nearest tables could see them clearly. First came my Morgan Stanley business card with Vice President, Investment Management printed beneath my name. Then my most recent performance review showing ratings in the top 5% of all company analysts. Financial statements documenting my portfolio performance and personal investment returns that exceeded industry averages. Press clippings from the Wall Street Journal, Forbes, and Financial Times featuring my analysis and market predictions, a certificate recognizing my contribution to a landmark sustainable investing initiative that had attracted over $200 million in new assets, client testimonials praising my analytical skills and strategic insights, letters from industry organizations inviting me to speak at conferences and serve on professional committees. Finally, the letter I had written but never sent, my attempt to explain the pain of being dismissed by the person whose approval I had desperately wanted. He read it silently, his expression transforming from confusion to something more complex as he processed not just my professional achievements but the emotional cost of his dismissal. The letter concluded, "I learned to be strong by being your daughter, even when you couldn't see my strength. I built a career you would be proud of if you had ever bothered to look. I hope someday you understand that success comes in many forms, and that your biggest disappointment might actually be your greatest achievement." Robert Hayes stood at the podium, surrounded by the evidence of his daughter's success he had dismissed, minimized, or ignored for years. The microphone captured his audible swallow as he attempted to process this new reality in front of 300 witnesses to his previous dismissal of my career. He began, then stopped, words failing him for perhaps the first time in his professional life. He cleared his throat and tried again. "I believe we'll conclude the formal program here. Please enjoy the remainder of the celebration." He gathered the documents back into the portfolio case with uncharacteristic care and stepped away from the podium, leaving his guests to process what they had just witnessed. Michael quickly took his place, his diplomatic training kicking in as he attempted to restore some normalcy to the evening. "Thank you all for joining us tonight to celebrate my father's remarkable career," he said, his professional smile firmly in place despite the obvious tension. "The bar remains open, and we encourage everyone to enjoy the jazz ensemble and dessert. Reception, as the band began playing and guests cautiously resumed their conversations, Robert Hayes sat alone at the head table, methodically examining each document from the portfolio case. He read my performance reviews twice, studied the financial statements showing returns that outperformed his own company's benchmarks, and held the industry awards as if seeing them for the first time. David approached cautiously, placing a hand on his father's shoulder. "Dad, are you okay?" Robert looked up, his expression unreadable. "What did I just see, David?" "Evidence that you were wrong about Alexandra," David replied quietly. "Evidence that she's been more successful than either Michael or I, and that we've all been blind to it." The week following the retirement party was a blur of professional obligations that provided welcome distraction from family drama. I threw myself into a complex merger analysis, grateful for work that demanded my complete attention and reminded me of my competence in a world where my value wasn't questioned. My colleagues at Morgan Stanley were too professional to ask directly about the incident. Wall Street gossip traveled fast, and several people had connections to Hayes Financial Group, but I sensed increased respect in their interactions with me. Standing up to Robert Hayes, regardless of the family relationship, had apparently impressed people who understood how difficult it was to challenge powerful figures in the financial industry. My father left 12 voicemails in the days following the party. I didn't listen to any of them, not ready to hear whatever combination of anger, justification, or manipulation he might have prepared. Sophia, my closest friend since business school, urged me to at least hear what he had to say. Maybe he actually learned something, she suggested over lunch at our usual spot near the Morgan Stanley building. Public humiliation has a way of clarifying things for powerful men. "I'm not ready," I replied, pushing my salad around my plate. "Every time I've given him the benefit of the doubt, I've ended up disappointed. I can't go through that cycle again." Marcus was more direct when I discussed it with him that evening. "You've spent 28 years hoping he would see you," he pointed out as we shared takeout Chinese food in our apartment. "At what point do you accept that he might not be capable of change?" 3 weeks after the retirement party, an unexpected visitor appeared at my office. Michael stood in my doorway looking uncharacteristically rumpled, his usually perfect appearance showing signs of stress and sleepless nights. "Can we talk?" he asked, hovering at the threshold as if uncertain of his welcome. I gestured to the chair across from my desk, saving my work before giving him my full attention. "This is a surprise." Michael ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture I remembered from childhood. "Dad hasn't been the same since the party, Alex. He's been reviewing your portfolio documents obsessively. He's called meetings with the board about implementing sustainable investing strategies like yours. He's even suggested bringing in outside consultants to evaluate our performance metrics." "That's not my problem, Michael," I replied, keeping my voice neutral despite the unexpected concern I felt. Robert Hayes had never been introspective about business decisions, let alone personal ones. "He wants to see you," Michael continued, "but he knows he doesn't deserve your time after what he said that night. He's been asking us how to apologize for something he can't really fix." I studied my brother's face, looking for signs of manipulation or strategic positioning, but Michael seemed genuinely distressed, caught between loyalty to our father and recognition of the harm that had been done. "Why are you here, Michael?" I asked finally, "because watching him realize what he's lost is painful," he admitted. "And because David and I have been talking about our own behavior. We enabled this for years, Alex. We let him dismiss you because it was easier than challenging him, and because, frankly, it benefited us." His honesty surprised me. Michael had always been the diplomat, smoothing over conflicts rather than acknowledging their deeper causes. "We've been reviewing your work," he continued, "the portfolio performance data, the client testimonials, the industry recognition. We had no idea what you've accomplished, and that's our fault for never asking. You never wanted to know," I pointed out. It was easier to accept Dad's narrative that I was wasting my potential. "You're right," he said simply. "And I'm sorry." For that, we're both sorry. After Michael left, I tried to focus on work but found myself distracted by this unexpected development. The Robert Hayes I knew didn't admit mistakes or show vulnerability. If he was really struggling with what he had learned about my career, it suggested a level of self-reflection I hadn't thought him capable of. That evening, I finally listened to one of his voicemails. His voice was subdued, lacking the confident authority I associated with him. "Alexandra, I know you don't want to talk to me, and I understand why. I've been looking at everything in your portfolio case. I was wrong about your career, about your potential, about what success looks like. I don't know how to fix this, but I want to try if you'll let me." The vulnerability in his voice was so unexpected that I played the message twice, trying to reconcile this uncertain tone with the man who had publicly dismissed me just weeks earlier. 2 days later, a package arrived at my apartment with Robert Hayes' return address. Inside, I found a leather-bound notebook with Hayes Family Investment Analysis embossed on the cover. Opening it revealed page after page of handwritten notes in my father's distinctive script, detailed analysis of my investment strategies, comparisons between my performance metrics and those of Hayes Financial Group, and what appeared to be a comprehensive study of sustainable investing practices. On the final page, he had written, "Alexandra, I've spent the past month learning about what you've built. Your approach to ESG investing is revolutionary, your client retention rates are exceptional, and your analytical skills exceed anything I've seen in 40 years of business. I was wrong about everything, and I'm sorry. If you're willing to teach an old man who thought he knew everything, I would be honored to learn from you." Dad, the notebook represented hours of research and reflection, a level of attention to my work that he had never shown when it might have mattered to our relationship. But the gesture also revealed something I hadn't expected: genuine respect for my professional accomplishments. After a week of consideration, I sent him a brief email. "Coffee at Starbucks on 5th Avenue, Saturday at a.m. Bring the notebook." Saturday morning arrived with unseasonably warm weather for late October. I arrived early at the Starbucks, selecting a table in the back corner where we could talk privately. My father appeared precisely at 10 o'clock, looking different than I had ever seen him: uncertain, almost vulnerable, clutching the notebook like a lifeline. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," he said as he sat down across from me, his voice careful and formal. "You said you wanted to learn," I replied, cutting through any small talk. "What specifically did you want to know?" For the next 2 hours, we discussed investment strategies, market analysis, and sustainable finance principles. But this conversation was unlike any we had ever had. He listened more than he spoke, asked questions rather than making pronouncements, and deferred to my expertise in ways that would have been unimaginable weeks earlier. "Your mother would be proud," he said suddenly during a pause in our discussion of ESG fund performance. The unexpected mention of my mother caught me off guard. "She always supported my career interests," I replied carefully. "She did more than that," he said, looking down at his coffee. "She warned me repeatedly that I was making a mistake by dismissing your potential. The night before she died, she made me promise to support whatever path you chose." His voice roughened with emotion. "I failed that promise completely." "Why?" I asked, the question that had haunted me for years finally spoken aloud. "Why was it so easy to believe in Michael and David but not in me?" He was quiet for a long moment, and when he finally answered, his honesty was startling. "Because admitting you were as capable as your brothers would have meant admitting I was wrong about women in business. Because recognizing your success would have required changing beliefs I'd held my entire life." He met my eyes directly. "Because it was easier to diminish your achievements than to acknowledge that my daughter might be smarter than I was." The raw honesty of his admission penetrated defenses I had built over decades of disappointment. This wasn't the dismissive patriarch I had known, but a man confronting the cost of his prejudices. "The portfolio you gave me," he continued, "it forced me to see what I had refused to acknowledge. You didn't just succeed in spite of my lack of support, you succeeded because you had the strength to pursue your vision without my approval. Over the following weeks, our coffee meetings became a regular occurrence. What started as professional discussions gradually expanded to include more personal topics, memories of my mother, reflections on family dynamics, and honest conversations about the pain his dismissal had caused. The breakthrough came during our fourth meeting, when he placed a formal document on the table between us. "I want you to consider something," he said, his voice more tentative than I had ever heard it. "Hayes Financial Group needs someone with your expertise in sustainable investing. We're being left behind by firms that understand ESG principles." I examined the document, a detailed proposal for joining Hayes Financial Group as Senior Vice President of Sustainable Investing, with full autonomy over strategy and client relationships. The salary was competitive with my Morgan Stanley compensation, and the equity stake offered was substantial. "This isn't charity," he said quickly, perhaps reading skepticism in my expression. "This is recognizing expertise the company needs. Your track record speaks for itself." "After everything that's happened," I said slowly, "why would you want me to work with you?" "Because you're the best at what you do," he replied simply. "Because the company needs to evolve, and you understand where the industry is heading. And because I want the chance to work with my daughter as an equal, something I should have offered years ago." I studied the proposal carefully, recognizing both the professional opportunity and the personal significance of his offer. This wasn't the token position I might have been offered years earlier, but a leadership role that would leverage my expertise and give me meaningful influence over the company's direction. "I'll need complete autonomy over sustainable investing strategy," I said finally. "No interference, no second-guessing, no suggestions that I'm too ambitious or aggressive." "Agreed," he said immediately. "And I want to restructure the performance evaluation system to include ESG metrics and long-term value creation, not just quarterly profits." "That makes sense," he acknowledged. "And I want this conversation documented formally, so there's no confusion about my authority or qualifications." He smiled for the first time in our recent interactions. "I'll have legal draft everything formally. You'll have complete documentation of your role and authority." 2 months later, I walked into the Hayes Financial Group headquarters for my first day as Senior Vice President of Sustainable Investing. The irony wasn't lost on me. The building I had been systematically excluded from as a child was now my workplace. But this time, I entered through the front door as an executive, not as Robert Hayes' dismissed daughter. My office was on the 32nd floor with a view of the harbor, the same view my father had enjoyed from his corner office down the hall. The nameplate on my door read Alexandra Hayes, SVP Sustainable Investing, the first time my name had appeared on Hayes Financial Group materials in a professional capacity. Michael and David had initially struggled with the transition, having their younger sister join the company as their peer, with expertise in an area they knew little about, required significant adjustment to family dynamics that had been established over decades. But as my sustainable investing division began attracting new clients and generating impressive returns, their resistance gradually transformed into respect. The first 6 months were challenging in ways I hadn't anticipated. Some longtime clients questioned whether Hayes Financial Group was abandoning its traditional values by embracing ESG investing. Several senior advisors expressed skepticism about sustainable investing's long-term viability. I had to prove myself not just as Robert Hayes' daughter, but as a financial professional whose strategies could deliver results. The breakthrough came when my sustainable investing portfolio outperformed the company's traditional funds for 3 consecutive quarters. Client retention rates in my division exceeded company averages, and new business attracted by our ESG offerings brought in over $300 million in assets under management within 8 months. More importantly, the relationship with my father continued to evolve. Our professional collaboration revealed sides of each other we had never seen before. He proved to be an excellent listener when he chose to be, and his decades of experience provided valuable perspective on client relationships and market cycles. I began to understand the pressures he had faced building the company, while he gained appreciation for the analytical rigor and innovative thinking I brought to investment strategies. The real test came during my first annual performance review. Sitting across from my father in his office, I waited to see if old patterns would reassert themselves or if genuine change had occurred. Your division's performance has exceeded every expectation, he began, consulting the formal evaluation document. Client satisfaction scores are the highest in the company. Your team's retention rate is perfect. The Sustainable Investing Conference you organized brought in 12 new institutional clients. He paused, setting down the paper and looking at me directly. But more than the numbers, I want you to know how proud I am of what you've built here. You've changed this company for the better, and you've changed me. Thank you, I replied, feeling a complex mix of professional satisfaction and personal healing. There's something else, he continued, reaching into his desk drawer. The board has approved a promotion. We'd like you to consider the position of Executive Vice President and Chief Investment Officer for Sustainable Finance. The title represented not just career advancement, but symbolic recognition that had been decades in the making. The role would give me oversight of all ESG initiatives across the company and a seat on the executive committee. I accept, I said, surprising myself with how quickly the decision came. 6 months later, I stood before the same ballroom at the Marriott where my father had delivered his retirement speech. But this time, I was the featured speaker at the Financial Industry Association's annual conference on sustainable investing. The topic was Building Wealth Through ESG Principles, a case study in transformation. As I looked out at the audience of financial professionals, I spotted my father in the third row, taking notes on a legal pad just as I had seen him do during business presentations throughout my childhood. But this time, he was learning from me. Sustainable investing isn't just about aligning investments with values, I began, my voice carrying easily across the ballroom. It's about recognizing that long-term value creation requires understanding environmental, social, and governance factors that traditional financial analysis often overlooks. After my presentation, he approached the podium as the audience filed out. Your mother would have been so proud, he said, his voice thick with emotion. She would have been proud of both of us, I replied, for finally figuring out how to see each other clearly. 2 years after joining Hayes Financial Group, I was featured on the cover of Investment Management Weekly with the headline The ESG Revolution: How Alexandra Hayes is Transforming Family Finance. The article detailed how Hayes Financial Group had become a leader in sustainable investing under my direction, and how the company's evolution reflected broader changes in the financial industry. The cover photo showed me in my office, with the harbor view behind me and awards from various industry organizations displayed on the credenza. But the image I treasured most was a smaller photo included in the article: my father and me at the Sustainable Investing Conference I had organized, both of us smiling as we discussed strategy with potential clients. The interview included a question about overcoming barriers in a male-dominated industry. My answer reflected the journey I had traveled. Success requires believing in your own capabilities even when others don't see them. It means being willing to prove yourself repeatedly, but also knowing when to stop seeking approval and start demanding respect. Marcus and I were married the following spring in a ceremony that reflected how much had changed in my family relationships. My father walked me down the aisle with obvious pride, and both my brothers served as groomsmen. During his father of the bride speech, Robert Hayes publicly acknowledged what he had failed to see for so many years. Alexandra taught me that wisdom comes from being willing to change your mind when presented with evidence that challenges your assumptions, he said, his voice carrying across the wedding reception. She succeeded not because of my guidance, but despite my blindness. I'm grateful she was strong enough to build her own path and generous enough to include me in it. The applause that followed felt different from the polite recognition I had received at family gatherings for years. This was genuine celebration of achievements that were finally being acknowledged by the people whose opinions had mattered most to me. Today, 5 years after that confrontation at the retirement party, Hayes Financial Group manages over $4 billion in assets, with my sustainable investing division responsible for nearly half of that growth. I've been promoted to Chief Investment Officer, making me the first woman to hold that position in the company's history. More importantly, the relationship with my father has evolved into something I never thought possible: a genuine partnership based on mutual respect and shared commitment to excellence. We still disagree on strategy sometimes, but our disagreements are professional discussions between equals rather than dismissals based on outdated assumptions. The portfolio case I gave him that night at the Marriott sits on his desk now, not as a rebuke but as a reminder of the cost of assumptions and the value of really seeing the people we claim to love. Sometimes I catch him looking at it during meetings, and I wonder if he's remembering the daughter he almost lost by refusing to see the woman she had become. My mother's pearl necklace, which I still wear to important presentations, has become a symbol of continuity between the woman who believed in my potential and the recognition that belief has finally received. In quiet moments, I think she would be satisfied with how the story turned out, not because it was easy, but because it was real. The Hayes legacy continues, but it looks different now than anyone might have predicted. It includes sustainable investing principles, innovative ESG strategies, and a recognition that strength comes in many forms. Most importantly, it includes the understanding that family businesses work best when they truly see and value all family members, not just the ones who fit predetermined expectations. Standing in my office at the end of another successful quarter, looking out at the harbor where ships carry cargo to destinations around the world, I think about journeys and destinations. The path I traveled wasn't the one anyone expected, but it led to a place where professional success and personal healing could finally coexist. The girl who was told to worry about dolls instead of investments grew up to revolutionize the very industry that had dismissed her. And sometimes that's exactly the kind of legacy worth building.